Bum, bum.
All right, and to the cloud.
Looks good. All right.
All right.
So
Jess.
I see we have one more joiner. Hello, Mikhail. I don't know how to pronounce this the right way, but hello. So I don't know. Should I just start from the top, or where do I start?
No, I think we can start from like research query editors and just take it from there. Like, yeah, this whole technical hiccup is just, let's put it behind us and just move on.
I mean, this is live TV, right?
Yeah, pretty much so. Yeah, but I think what's
right.
important is that the next community call is not the first Monday of April. It's April 12th from what you said so far. And I think, yeah, you can reach us on Grafana Fails on Slack. And today is about Elastic Search raw query editors. Yeah. And if you have feedback, comments, feel free to comment asynchronously. And Jess, I think the stage is yours.
Thank you. Yeah. So we have not looked super specifically into Elasticsearch so far, but we have run general research on how people use our query builders and what they are looking for in a query builder. So I wanted to share these research results with you, and maybe you have additions and comments to your specific experience about Elastic that can enrich our research results that we already have. And thank you, good point. I was about to forget to share the presentation. That would have been bad. Right, so some facts about our research that we ran. So we had a survey about query editors, and from that survey, we were able to get 2 community volunteers, and then also we interviewed 4 of our own team members. So we had 6 user interviews about query editors. And if you want to see like what kind of users those were and what their experience was, so 78% of them were longtime Grafana users, so quite proficient users, and they all had Prometheus as their most used data source. This is of course a bit unfortunate because it doesn't cover the Elastic use case super well, but that's exactly why we're having this call, right, to learn more. And maybe you can tell us some similarities or equal usage patterns that also apply to you. We'll see. Curious to hear more. So our users that we surveyed and interviewed used query editors equally in Explorer and the panel edit. Some preferred Explorer, some preferred the panel edit, and then we also had people who used both equally, and in the end, like, it just distributes to the same amounts of people. That's very interesting. So I guess we have just all kinds of experts out there for querying stuff. And also we asked people how they felt about our query editors, what the experience was like. We had some users who said they really enjoyed it. The majority said either it's pretty good, over 30%, or it's doing the job okay, over 30%. And then we also had like almost a third saying it's not that great, but we also had I hate it as an option, and no one said that, so that's something. Then again, if people really hated it, probably they aren't using Grafana anymore, so they wouldn't be contributing to the survey, or at least I presume that's how it would be. So yeah, we can see from these results that there is definite improvement potential. So we asked these users what are must-haves for them for a query editor. The biggest issues that they had were auto-suggestions and autocomplete. Also, that the query editor be easy to understand even without a manual. So no one wants to read the docs in order to learn how to use a query editor. It should kind of work self-explanatory and naturally. Most users wanted an option to switch between a visual query editor and a raw code editor. I mean, that's the GitHub issue that sparked this call, right? That's kind of the same need. Also, users wanted the query editors to cover as many features of the query language as possible. That's also where the option to switch between visual and code comes in handy, because usually the visual query editors has limits of what they can actually do in terms of complexity. And then people really wanted the query editors to be optimized for keyboard usage, especially the power users really like tabbing through their queries and not clicking around too much. And an example quote from the interviews was, "I like a combination of visual that covers the most frequently built queries and a text-based one that's quick to edit with great tab completion support that does not get in the way." And this tab completion support that does not get in the way already implies that that is something that maybe Grafana is not doing the best at least for Prometheus. That was one of the biggest complaints with autocomplete. And also, yeah, auto suggestion. So users have said, for example, that the tab completion is sluggish, it takes a while before suggestions load, or they don't load at all. And also in Explore specifically, it seems that the autocomplete gets in the way more than it helps. Since we ran this research, I think a couple of months ago, and I have already relayed the feedback to the team, I'm pretty sure that a lot of Prometheus team members are already working on this stuff, because of course, that's not great feedback and we want to improve that. But if you have similar experience about a different query editor, or if these issues are something that happened to you back when we still had a raw code editor for Elastic, of course, we want to know this so we can make it better. So users say that when they have a suggestion, they want to hit tab to select it and not use the arrow key. So like a lot of fine-grained usability feedback came out of this research. And one feedback that we got about querying Elasticsearch in Grafana was that for the Elastic query language, the hierarchy is missing in the Grafana query editor. And what the user said was, right now you have to do the double work mentally when picking a field, because it works in a reverse way from what you expect. If I want a derivative, I would like to pick that first and then add the origin. So that's about the way that Elastic data is structured. And at least from what this user said, Grafana doesn't represent that in the way that it's supposed to be, or like the mental model that feels natural to Elasticsearch users. But that was, I think, the only feedback that we got specifically about Elastic. So now would be a great point in time to hear more about this. So I prepared some questions that maybe some of you have answers for. So stuff like, what are your needs in a good raw code editor for queries in general? But also specifically for the Elastic use case, what did the previously available Elastic raw editor do well? Like, what do you want back? But also, what can we do better in the raw code editor that the visual editor isn't doing for you? Like, so many questions. If you have answers to any of these, feel free to jump into the discussion right away, or add comments asynchronously in the video or on Slack or via email. Anything goes. We want to hear it all.
Daniel or Mikhail, do you have any experience on comments on that and what Jess just showed?
No, unfortunately, I never worked with the Elastic query editor.
Yes, a little bit. So I don't know, I suppose if you think back to like years ago, where I don't know, before Grafana had support for Elasticsearch at all, I don't know, it was quite common to work with the JSON blob, and then be able to copy and paste it into Grafana later on when it had support for raw query editor. That's one thing that got lost. You can't easily copy and paste from but the reason for losing that was it was just so complicated on the Grafana side. What we're doing with time series is like loads of nested things, so it doesn't translate anymore. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add. I don't have a lot to say just on this.
So maybe a follow-up question to that. I can imagine that copy pasting is super important, but what could other use cases for a raw code editor be apart from copy pasting? Is there anything that comes to mind? Maybe Gio, for you as well?
So things like maths as well. So that there are what are they called? You can do like these some things together and do sort of like the more advanced things. And we have like limited support for it in Grafana. But like want to be able to do like more advanced versions of those. That's another use case.
There is another use case which I find pretty frustrating, which is that it's impossible to reorder fields in the Visual Query Editor. Meaning that, for example, if you're doing aggregation, they basically run one after the other, and sometimes you just want to add something before the last one. And with the current query editor, you cannot really add something as a, let's say, first position, which means you have to delete everything you have done until now and add what you need, and then add back all the aggregations you wanted, which sometimes is kind of frustrating because you have to remember what you had before and whatnot. And I think like in this case, a raw query editor would help. Like given that we are, I mean, let's say we are not implementing the reordering in the Visual Query Editor. A raw text query editor will help because you will have the possibility to do it manually, at least.
I see, that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I know there are people, for example, right now editing manually the panel JSON data to do that, because it will basically do the same thing. But yeah.
But is that more tedious because it's not specifically the Elastic query language? Or like, could that just solve that need? Or why would people still want the raw editor if they can just change the panel JSON?
I would say one of the reasons could be, so Elasticsearch itself has a lot of features that we don't support because they are slightly out of scope for Grafana sometimes. There are advantage use cases that we don't explicitly support, but that Grafana could theoretically support. So I guess people want to have this freedom of using Elasticsearch features that we don't explicitly support in Grafana, even though that might break the query itself, because there is, as Daniel was saying, there is a lot of magic going on under the hood.
Interesting. So maybe coming back to raw code editors in general, maybe that's something that Mikhail can say something about. Like, is there anything that you generally think raw code editors need to do or need to have as a feature in order to work for you?
All data sources are different. I mean, in my experience, as I was working in Redis Labs, I was working a lot with a Redis data source. And for that, we have different data types. And for that, I had a special code editor as well. So where you can actually do the raw input. So I totally agree that it makes sense to have this code editor, especially you already in Grafana, you already have a code editor class, right? Which allow you to change JSON. So having this capability actually will improve. You can add with custom features, right, which is not available in Visual Editor. If there is a new version of Elastic or any other data source will come out, which is not supported as a Visual yet, it can be, you can add it, right? So in this case, you can use the newest feature of the data source itself, Elastic, any of them. And when Grafana will implement it in Visual, it's great, but you're already using it as a raw. And the copy paste is great as well, because sometimes something can be changed in Visual. And for example, some ID type, something changed. But having this code editor actually will keep your raw query as it is. So I think it's actually a good feature for advanced users.
All right, thank you. So Daniel or Gio, have you used the OG raw query editor that we used to have in Elastic? And like, was it any good? Or if we thought about doing a raw query editor for Elastic again, would we do it completely differently because it was years ago and we can do it much better by now?
I didn't actually use the old one. I mean, like I used the one before the current version, because the one that had the raw query mode was I think was like 3 years ago that or 4 years ago that we stopped supporting it, or maybe even more. So I didn't really use it. I think that with the current creator we can do a lot of things. Like it's cleaner to work with the new one than the previous one. Might be a bit biased, but I think it supports more use cases, like on a code level. It's easier to extend now. I'm not sure whether like all this flexibility should be really, I don't know, maybe exploited to do things that Visual Creator is not supposed to do. I don't know where to put the boundary for the Visual Creator to keep it simple, maybe. I don't know if I'd rather get a really like full raw creator over the visual one, or keep pushing new features in the visual one. That's something
That's a great question. Like, does anyone else have opinions about this question of where the visual query editor should consciously draw a line and say, I'm not allowing this because if you want to do it at this complexity level, then just do it in code? Or do you think that everything and anything should be covered by a visual editor if possible?
I agree. Visual have to allow you to do simple things, so it won't be that complicated for users who just started to use data source. For advanced users, code editor is a good way to go. But visual have to be as easy as possible.
Yeah, for example, I
So
imagine.
that means, sorry, Gio, you first.
No, I was just like adding to it. I was imagining like the Elasticsearch creator, Elastic supports like a ton of different kind of aggregations and options for each kind of aggregation. And I'm imagining like a new user using the Elasticsearch creator, and opening a drop down, having like, I don't know, 150 options to select from, which are like maybe like 99% of them are not even that common, and almost I don't want to say useless, but they're very very niche use cases. So I imagine like those new users being overwhelmed with information for if they have a full-fledged visual editor with tons of options. So I'd rather keep it simple, like serving the most common use cases, let's say.
Yeah, I think like what you said, Gio, is extremely important. It's like the question of where to draw a line is most common use cases for people, and everything that is out of the scope of most common use cases, like 80-20, should be raw query editor.
Yeah. I mean, like, for example, in Elasticsearch, you can do a full text search and, having scores on document based on text. But at the end of the day, Grafana, it's a time series visualization tool, and we are now introducing logs and traces. So it doesn't really make sense to have, to have the full potential of Elasticsearch in an editor that is not supposed to do this kind of things. That's my point.
I don't really agree. I mean,
No?
yes, Grafana started as a visual tool. Now it supported logs and everything. But if you actually create your own custom panel and you're going to use Elastic data source, you can do whatever you want. Do the full search with the special panel, add the data, delete the data. So I'm looking at the platform as an application platform rather than visualization tool like right now. So I mean, everything data source can provide is great, right? But it should not be limited as time series metrics anymore.
No, that's true. That's true. I agree with that. Like my point was on the 80-20% of use cases. So like what you say is very true, but I think this is some use case that will be solved by a raw text editor. Does it make sense?
Right. Right. I mean, data source have to provide with data, right, access to that, and the way how it's going to display it. There are so many custom panels lately, community create. So let's give them the chance to implement what they're looking for, right? Then they limit them.
Yeah. But that's also a good point. I think it's a very good point because, yeah, where do we draw the limit? Because this is a totally valid use case. Like someone would like to have this kind of data and query it via Elasticsearch. So maybe it's a very niche feature or a very niche use case, but should we support it? Explicitly, at least.
Yeah, and like this is one of the things, these edge cases are really hard to gauge how important they are without user feedback. And even if we get user feedback, we don't even know whether it's representative. If we have 2 users who say we really need this, but they are the only 2 users in the world who really need this, and we have no way of figuring that out right now, right? So currently it's really hard for us to make these choices, and I guess we take a lot of educated guesses in making them. But the more user feedback we get about this stuff, the easier it will be. So I can only encourage users to take a good example from Mikhail here and join these calls and talk to us.
It's my second call when I joined. I joined previous one, this one. But when my question is, when you're working on with Elastic data sources, are you working with Elastic companies themselves? Because they're the one who knows. I mean, I'm working with Redis Labs. I know what our users are using, right? What data types, what kind of queries. So they can actually provide this feedback. So it will be great to talk to someone in Elastic themselves and ask them.
We have some contributors from Elastic, which were helping us with the new version of the data source. We did a bigger factoring recently. Yeah, that's a good point. We can probably gather some feedback directly from them, probably.
I mean, because
yeah, something that I haven't considered. Great idea. Very good.
Right, me working in the customer success, I know exactly what is 20% of the use cases we need to cover in Redis, for example. So they should know. I mean, you should find the right contact in Elastic who can tell you this is what you need.
We can just proxy this information in a way. It'd be smart the way we obtain it.
Yep.
Because it's really hard to support different data sources when you don't actually know how the users use it or how it was developed. And this kind of insight you can get from the company themselves.
Yeah, that's also true that, I mean, like Elastic has Kibana as their own product. And I don't know if their opinion on what user wants, it's like might be a little bit biased by what Kibana offers. Like I think Kibana and Grafana offers two different, not totally, but are two fairly different products. So I wonder how biased a user of Kibana will be using Grafana in terms of what they expect from an Elasticsearch query editor. But that's a good point. I mean, that for sure could give like a lot of input on what we should support and what to look to, at least.
That seems like a fairly basic question. Do the people using the Elastic data source want to have a query editor in Grafana that is basically the same, or at least very similar to the one in Elastic?
As far as I know, like I'm not, I didn't talk to that many users, I'll be honest, but as far as I know, like the powerful thing about Kibana is that it really enables you to explore your data. That you don't have to know the data beforehand in order to query it. Like Kibana itself guides you through your data, through your indexes to extract information. That's why I think there are two different use cases. But that's a good point.
But wouldn't some of those users potentially also be using Grafana? Like the more advanced users, maybe they need less guidance. I don't know. Maybe they still need that amount of guidance. But especially the not so advanced users, they might profit from that a lot. Like, or how would you evaluate that? Like, how is the better exploring of Kibana something that we could learn from for Grafana?
Yeah. I know for sure that some of the people I know that that are Elasticsearch users use both Kibana and Grafana. So it doesn't feel like there is something like that doesn't feel like they are competitors in this field. Like I think people use them both equally to do different things. So would be nice maybe to ask those users what they use, why they use Grafana for some tasks and why they use Kibana for other tasks. But I really don't know the answer here.
Yeah, like what are you doing when you're in the Elastic stack versus when you're using Elastic data in the Grafana stack?
Kibana only works with Elastic, right, as a data source.
Yeah.
Nothing else. I have used Kibana a long time ago, but I mean, Grafana is great because you can have an access to multiple data sources at the same time. When you see your Elastic cache, you can see metrics in Kubernetes, somewhere else, right? So this is the use case where you're going to use Grafana for that compared to Kibana. But we actually have you had a chance to look at Kibana, how they do that as a team before doing Elasticsearch?
I think I personally like use Kibana a bit. Like I'll be honest, like when like using Kibana felt totally different for me. Like I don't know. It's like using Grafana enables me to query my data as a user that knows how his data is stored, where, how, and so on. While Kibana felt sort of like an exploration tool for my data. But I might not be the best user for that use case because I'm very used to Grafana, so I know how to use Grafana and not so much Kibana.
Could you, Gio, elaborate a bit about this Kibana having feeling a bit like exploration tool?
Like the way, for example, you create a visualization on Kibana, let's say, everything starts from the visualization that you want to achieve. More or less, that's not always the truth. But it feels like there is a lot more emphasis on the visualization you want to achieve. And then they will guide you picking the fields from your database. So it's not like I want to visualize a time series, then give me those fields. and they ask you for fields in order to visualize this time series data or these, I don't know, whatever other kind of visualization you want to have. While in Grafana, it's sort of different. Like, I wouldn't even know how to explain that properly, but it sort of feels like I already know what I'm going to achieve. So it's not, there is no one asking me, oh, what kind of visualization you want to achieve? No, I already know what I'm doing. And here's my query, do that for me. That was my feeling, like comparing Grafana and Kibana, but again, like I know Grafana way more than Kibana, so I might not be the best user to compare them.
But it's fine. We want all the perspectives you want, we can have.
I'm also curious because you described it that way. So do you feel like the focus on the visualization in Kibana is more of an extra hurdle that you don't need?
Yes. Like I feel like that this whole emphasis on guiding the user on Kibana is sometimes it's overwhelming. Like, oh, you're asking me for that, for this, and then like midway through you realize, oh no, that's not the way I get this nice visualization I saw the other day. I don't know. To me personally, Grafana feels more immediate. Like, okay, I have this. There's Elasticsearch. I can have my query. I do my query, and I will get a result that I was expecting. Yeah, it's sort of like
yeah.
I was like just thinking about like it sort of feels to me that Kibana sometimes it gets in the way, meaning that they control how you get your data.
Yeah,
But again,
that was what I was gonna ask. Like, because you said that sometimes you end up in Kibana with a result, or like halfway through you realize that the result is not what you were looking for, and in Grafana that's not a problem. So how do you actually decide what the right result is?
I would say in Grafana, I know the query I'm doing. In Kibana, the query you do is actually, no, it's not really hidden, but it's secondary. Like Grafana really has a lot of emphasis on the query itself. So you're building queries in Grafana. In Kibana, you're building visualizations, which is actually very good. Like I like that idea of, you know, building a visualization, not a query, because like I'm exploring my data and let me play around, and okay, I have some nice visualization now for my data, which maybe sometimes I might not fully understand because I don't know what I'm querying. While in Grafana, I know the query I'm doing, but not being an expert in, I don't know, statistics or whatever, I might just, you know, picking having a visualization for a query which is not really descriptive. So you have, you know, like pros and cons for both approaches.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I would love to hear from other people their thoughts about this and how they compare these two very different approaches to querying data, because I agree that Grafana is focusing more on the actual query part. I mean, you have a preset visualization there, and I think 80% of our users just keep that preset time series graph and don't bother changing anything about it, because it's enough for them in order to see what their query does, and that's all they need, right? So I'm really curious to understand like what it is about querying then that leads them to their result. I'm looking at the questions here, and then because we still have a few minutes left and Mikhail is also still here. Maybe, do you have any general feedback about query editors? Anything like, what is your favorite query editor and why? Or what is the worst query editor that you have used and why? Like, what can we learn for making better query editors in general?
I don't really have a feedback. I'm here to listen more,
Okay,
but I
that
mean, it
works.
works for me. The query. I mean, with any query, I can get what I need most of the time, so I'm good.
So maybe follow-up question just in general, Mikhail. Are you more of a keyboard querying person, or are you one like that likes clicking and picking stuff from drop-downs?
I'm more visual guy, so
I
it's easy.
see.
Because I mean, when you want to explore the data when I started to work with data source, right, with anything, I don't know my options. So for me, it's easy to click around. And then when you're familiar with data source, you already know that you can go to directly with a query editor, do some hacking, right? Sort of a case. But visual works great for me.
Cool, interesting. Gio, what about you?
I would say actually the same. Like I like to use my keyboard to use the query editor when it's feasible, or when, let's say, when the editor itself supports keyboard navigation. But yeah, like I try, I like to click around and to see what I can do. I'm not that fan of these, like text editors, but I can see their strength compared to visual one. But I also like, to click around and explore my way building a query.
And that's something that I find so interesting. So if I listen to you and then also the comments in the original GitHub issue about this, Gio, you mentioned, oh, you wouldn't want to replace the visual editor with a code editor. And I don't think anyone wants that. I think
No.
everyone would just like the best of both worlds, right? To have the visual exploration options and it more of an exploratory approach to querying. But then sometimes if you just want to copy paste something, or if you already exactly know what you want to do, then it can be faster to do it in code instead of having to do lots of clicking, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
It's like what you get is what you see approach. When you can have this visual approach, when you configure what you want, right, visual, and then you have a second tab or immediate you can switch to code editor. Even sometimes I feel that maybe it's not one-to-one, right? You cannot switch from visual to code directly, maybe just start from scratch from code or just get this as a template. But like immediate switching from one mode to another one will be great if it's possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things everyone in the research, like regardless of the data source, said in an ideal world, they would love to have this one-to-one connection between visual and code and the option to switch back with no limits. But if it only was that easy, right? It's so hard to build that on a technical side. So I think it's not realistic that we're gonna be able to do that anytime soon. But yeah, I guess it also depends on the complexity of the queries. So we'll see. We'll see. All right. Any more questions from you? Because theoretically, I mean, we lost a bit of time due to the technical hiccup, but theoretically, the call is over now. So
Do you have anything new you're working right now so you can show us what's coming for in Grafana 8, for example?
Oh, we have so many things that we're working on right now, but I don't think I can show anything concrete. Gio, do you have anything?
I don't know about showing, but I think that the OSS roadmap has been posted publicly. If it hasn't been, then it will be soon. Maybe we can link that in the YouTube comments when this is posted.
Will do, absolutely.
Yeah, 7.5, however, is going to be coming in March, and so that is coming very soon. I don't have the list of features yet, but keep posted. The beta should be posted very, very soon.
Okay, thank you.
And one feature that is going to be released in Grafana 7.5 as like an MVP beta version is reusable panels. So that's not very related to query editors, but it will enable you to use one panel in multiple places instead of having to make copies every time. So that could be interesting if that's something that is a pain point for you.
Yeah, themes. One of the major themes for 8.0 is dashboard management, and so that reusable panels is going to be a big part of it. And if you want to have an effect on how the end result looks, then you definitely want to get involved in testing the beta and providing feedback, because we do take a lot of guidance from user feedback.
Thank you. Do you have anything special for streaming capabilities? Not really.
If you mean the streaming data sources, yes, actually, but I'm afraid I can't go into too much detail there because I haven't written the documentation for it yet. So that's how I learn about things. I write the docs.
Okay.
But yes,
Thank
that
you.
is actually one of the major things that we're leaning into.
Okay, because I tried new time series panel, which works much faster and better than the graph before. There is a special dot which show you that it's actually streaming data source, which is great. But I mean, I talked. There was only one streaming data source like 6 months ago, 7 months ago, and not a lot was done recently with streaming data source. Maybe it's not a thing yet, because I think it's great to have a streaming data source which can stream data in real time.
Yeah, I believe that right now it is either part of the Grafana data source or the test data DB data source, and you can actually, I'm pretty sure it's test data DB. Like I said, the docs for that haven't been written yet because it's so much early days. But I think you can hook a data source into the test data DB streaming right now. But yeah, there will be a more fleshed out and finished version of that coming soon. I want to say for 8.0, but you know, right now the 8.0 roadmap is still pretty general, and we're trying to see how much stuff we can cram into that. And there will be a lot more deep dives and announcements in GrafanaCon when we get around to that event.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, cool. So I think we have discussed all the questions. Also, we have run out of time. So thank you all for your time or for watching if you're watching this later. And we're hoping to hear from you and see you again next time. Remember, the next UX community call is on April 12th as an exception. It's a Monday, but not the first Monday. Yeah, hopefully see you around, and who knows, maybe by then we will also have something to show from the upcoming Grafana 8 release. I don't want to promise too much though. I don't know yet. We haven't made plans, but we'll see. You can check the agenda in the meantime and see when we come up with anything, or follow us on Twitter and get updates about upcoming community calls. In the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a good rest of your March. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.